Welcome, welcome to another episode of The Shaman's Wife. I hope you're enjoying this mini-series with my dear friend Alicia. And of course, if you want to find out more about Alicia, or more about me, or more about the Heads Together podcast, go to the show notes. There will be all the links you need. And if you haven't already, I urge you to pre-order your copy, or if you're listening to this when the book has now been published, order your copy of The Shaman's Wife. This is a transformational book, and I'm so honored to have Alicia with me for this mini-series where we are diving into the background to this powerful memoir. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Heads Together podcast. I'm Jill Mokes, and I am obsessed with cutting through the noise when it comes to growing your business. Each week, via intimate coaching conversations and inspirational stories, I share what it really takes to get the results you want in a way that feels right to you. I am all about attracting higher ticket opportunities, building authentic relationships, and creating the abundant, full-fat version of your dream business. I mean, how many of us have beavered away creating a light version of what we really want? The thing is, I honestly believe when you're outstanding at what you do, there is no limit to what you can achieve. So, are you ready to put our heads together and make it happen? Let's go. Alicia Rodriguez, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for this very special limited series for the Heads Together podcast, where you're going to be sharing with us some really deep insight and some of the background story, I guess, to your incredible memoir, The Shaman's Wife. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me. It's pretty exciting about the launch of the book and actually having this conversation with you too, Jill.
Oh, thank you. For anyone who hasn't heard of Alicia's memoir yet, if you follow me or have been following me for a while, you probably will have done, because I am obsessed with this book. It is amazing. Alicia did something really bold and actually shared the book in installments with her Substack readers. So there's already a lot of buzz about this book. It's a very, very special memoir. Sometimes I think when we think of memoir, we almost think like autobiography, where we're just reading the story of someone's life. This book is so much more than that. There are so many lessons inside it. And I guess that's why I really was thrilled when Alicia agreed to come on and make this limited series with me for the podcast, because I feel like reading the book is one thing, but really being able to discuss in more detail some of the incredible lessons and takeaways from the book in a bit more detail is very exciting for me, because I got so much from the book. And and of course want to share that with my listeners. So again, thank you. This first episode, we're talking about the role of risk in self-discovery. So I know we're going to come on to that more deeply. I would love it, Alicia, if you could share with us a little bit about the pivotal moment, I guess, in your journey that really inspired you to write The Shaman's Wife.
So it's interesting because the book actually took, let me see how many, almost 9 years total, because I started writing it in 2015. I was in Quito with Napo, the shaman, and I had written probably about 3 chapters of it. And I started very chronologically. I started when I arrived in Ecuador for the very first time, when I was invited and I arrived. And I wrote the 3 chapters. And after the 3rd chapter, there was something inside of me that said, I don't think this book is ready to be written. Like, just something really intuitive about it. Like, I realized that I wasn't at the end of a story. I was actually at the very, very birthing of the story, at the very beginning of the story. And the other thing I realized, I took a memoir class in 2015. And when I did, I also realized intuitively that I wasn't the writer. that needed to write this story, right? I knew that I could write, obviously, but what I envisioned for a book required a different level of competency, skill, craft, art, technique. And I thought, between these two things, I'm going to set it aside. And then in 2019, after I had left the property, I hired a writing mentor and I had to submit chapters. And when I did, she read them and she said, I want you to write, and this goes to your pivotal moment, another kind of pivotal moment. She said, I want you to write about a watershed moment when you realized, oh my God, what have I done? And I immediately knew what the moment was. I knew everything about it. I knew every detail about it. And that became the first chapter, because when I submitted it to her, she said, oh no, this is your first chapter. And then I had to rewrite everything. So it was, I think for me, the moment that I knew I had to write it didn't really start in 2015, when in 2015, it was like, this would make an interesting book, right? But it wasn't until like 2019, 2020. And then, of course, in December of 2020, I moved to Portugal with the intention of, this is the year that I finish this book. This is when I commit to the book, right? So it's taken me a couple of years on and off. Moving to another country has its own challenges and opportunities. But it was, I think, when I was working with the writing mentor and I started really getting into it. And I will say that one of the things that happened, and I think for anyone who wants to write memoir, one of the things she said to me when I submitted, I can't remember which chapter or a couple of chapters, and she said to me, you're a good writer, but you're not in it. And I was like, of course I'm in it. That's my story. And she said, no, you're not. You're reporting. And it's like, you're reporting something like as if it belonged to someone else. She says, you're emotionally unavailable. And I knew she was right. I knew she was right, because she said, you're going to have to go back there emotionally. You're going to have to feel all the feels to be able to write this story, to have it be the story that you really want it to be, and to have it impact people. She said, it's not a report. It's a sharing of a very different kind of story that if you really do want it to make a difference, you're just going to have to be emotionally available in the writing. So it wasn't one moment. It was like that kind of juncture where all those things came together.
So that makes so much sense, because, and I think this is the point I was getting at really when I said, this isn't an autobiography, and an autobiography is like, I think that reporting the story, that's an autobiography. It's this happened, then this happened, then this happened.
Yeah, right.
And this memoir that you've written is so different to that. So her advice to you you used a word there that I think is important. She said, you're going to have to go back there. That, knowing what we know about your story and having read the book, that must have felt challenging in itself, to realize that you couldn't just report on what happened. You had to go back there, relive what happened, share the emotion of what happened. Because it must have been a decision that you made in that moment to go all in, right?
Yeah, it was very intentional. At that moment, I knew if this really matters to me in the way that I'm saying it matters, I have to commit to this. And I commit wholeheartedly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the book is, I'm sure, all the more incredible for it. I think that's one of the things that really pours out of the book, is the raw truth that's inside it, that I know wasn't easy to write, can't have been.
It wasn't. And one of the things that you mentioned, I had serialized the chapters in advance on Substack. And so I received a lot of feedback, and it really confirmed what she was getting at the time, when someone says to me, I could feel the dampness in the rainforest. I could smell the river or the ocean. I could see you standing on a cliff looking out over the ocean. I couldn't have brought the reader into the experience in that way if I hadn't been willing to be in the experience again myself as a writer. And for me, that was the best compliment when someone says, I felt like I was right there with you. And the imagery was important. Like, I kind of live that way anyway. I live in a multi-sensual world. I'm probably highly visual, but I'm also sensitive to touch, hear. And a lot of writers have a difficulty with bringing all the senses into their writing, and they kind of stay with the visual. For me, I live in a multi-sensual world. I always have since I was a child. My ability to bring in the sound of the wind or the taste of the ocean, I think, was something I kept refining and refining and refining so that it could be an experience that I could share with someone and that they could feel resonance with what was happening emotionally. To your point, you said some of the chapters are really difficult. There were 2 chapters I knew that were going to crush me. I didn't necessarily write the whole thing chronologically. Sometimes I wrote chapter 26 before I wrote chapter 21. I had an outline for it, but I stayed away from those 2 chapters. And then I realized, I have to write this and I'm really going to have to dig deep. And one of the things I did for myself was I went away to a retreat center owned by a friend of mine up near Lisbon. The woman's name is Michelle. She owns it. I told her I need to be in a safe place. I need to be taken care of. I need someone who will feed me and allow me to walk around, in a beautiful place. She has horses and all this. And she let me bring my dog. And so I wrote those 2 chapters over Easter weekend, I remember. And I was going to leave on a Saturday. And she said, no, you need to stay one more day. And she was right. And I did. And that's where I really got into that very difficult chapter. And then when I finished it, I was in my room and I called her and I said, I need a witness. I need somebody to witness this. And I have to read it out loud. And she came to my room and I read it out loud, like stop, start, because I got really emotional. And she just held space for me. None of this did I anticipate when I wrote the memoir. I've been writing all my life. It's personal development books and, business and journals and leadership and all the stuff that I've done. But I've never had to be this intimate. And I'm an introvert and I'm a private person. So for me, that vulnerability is, I think, what makes it resonant for especially women.
I think that's what I was just going to say. I guess thinking about the impact that this book is going to have on the lives of other women, was that kind of already in your mind? And did that help you go there, if you like? Because I guess it wasn't just for you, was it? The sharing of this story wasn't just cathartic for you. There is so much that will impact the lives of other women. I'd love to know how that intention formed part of the writing journey for you.
When you write something like a memoir, you think, I know that this is my process. I thought, why would anybody care? Why does anybody care about me or my story, right? And then I realized that it was a very different kind of story. It was very unique. The elements were once in a lifetime kinds of elements. How do you combine a business person who lives in a certain environment, who then leaves her whole life to go to Ecuador, lives with a traditional Ecuadorian shaman, builds a retreat center, and goes through all this journey. And I'm Latina. So I can do that because I'm Latina. It's a little different. I think the story would have been different if I had been just a white woman, a white American woman, right? But I'm Latina. And a lot of what's in the book has to do with my upbringing. In retrospect, I can see the chain of events, right, that led me to meet this person.
I mean, that's interesting. And perhaps, I guess you're actually bringing it round to the real question that I would love to put to you, which is more around this journey of self-discovery. So the original question I was asking was about the intention behind the impact you wanted the book to have on other women. But I think actually bringing it back to your own journey of self-discovery and what other people, other women can learn from that, I'm really interested in. So when you say that the events kind of stacked up in terms of this woman from America, this businesswoman, leadership coach, what some people would think, a lot to lose by giving up everything and moving to Ecuador with a shaman. A lot of people are going to be like, what a crazy one.
Yeah.
But of course, you do such a good job in the book of bringing us on the journey with you. And I think that journey of empowerment and self-discovery that you went on is where the impact is going to be for other women reading the book. So I would really like to hear from you how that journey of self-discovery unfolded for you. And the title of this episode of this podcast is The Role of Risk in Self-Discovery. And the kind of risks you took were huge because, like I say, you had a lot to give up to even start this journey with Napo and then to navigate everything that happened after that. I'd really love to hear about that.
I've been a leadership and executive coach for a long time. And so a lot of the work I do with people is around self-discovery. And sometimes people are afraid of what they're going to discover. And oftentimes people come to me at a threshold. And the threshold is who I've been doesn't work anymore. It's like having a suit and it no longer fits, but you don't know what you should buy, right? And so there's that point in time that people discover their life doesn't work for them and it's inauthentic. But the fear comes not knowing what comes after that. The risk is in stepping into that big void, into that big unknown, right? And then, of course, then fear starts having a conversation in your mind, like all the what I call what ifs. What if these awful things happen? What if I'm a bag lady? What if this, right? And so anybody who undertakes a journey of self-discovery, inherent in that is fear and risk, because the risk says you're going to lose X, Y, and Z. You're going to lose friends. You're going to lose work. You're going to lose clients. You're going to lose. And nobody ever asks the question, what if you create a life that is completely aligned with what matters to you and brings you joy and a sense of purpose and meaning? And so that is the journey of self-discovery. It's like, can I stand in this void, like open arms, not like, oh my God, no, but open arms and say, I'm willing to risk who I've been, because really it's a sense of identity. I'm willing to risk who I've been, how I've been seen by the world, because of course, status, ego, all of that stuff, in service of leading a more joyful and authentic life. And so my journey was, I'm not recommending anybody drop their whole life and do what I did, because as I tell my friends, there's a fine line between crazy and courage, and I'm not sure which side I'm on. So you can do that. It's best if you have a facilitator with you or a coach or a guide or something with you. But the risk for me was like when you read all the things I risked, I went into it honestly, not fully understanding what I was risking. The obvious things were apparent to me. But when I got there and I started living in Ecuador with him, there were other things that were at risk that I did not anticipate. I didn't know.
Really? Tell us about that.
Well, it's a very different culture. And so when I talk about a sense of identity, I go as a confident woman and I become this more subservient person. The culture says women are second-class citizens. They are subservient to their husbands. And although Napo at first didn't show up that way, he did in Ecuador. It was the whole machismo bit, right? And then having to here I am on a journey of self-discovery, seeking authenticity and spirituality. And now I have to contort myself into the most inauthentic version of myself. I did not anticipate that.
How did you navigate that?
I fought. I would do it by finding quiet moments to write. The reason I can recall and write so much detail into the book was because I had a journal and I recorded everything. I mean, the book was written in the journal. And if I didn't recall something, it was written in the journal. So I could do it. So the writing really saved me. And things like my animals, I had 5 dogs, and nature. Like I would just putter in the garden. And I digress a little, but there's a word I use. It means the little light. It's called la lucecita. And everybody has a lucecita like right here. It's a little light. It's the soul light, right? I have the ability to see that in most people. And I remember when I would look at my own light, it'd start getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'd go, it's like, it was kind of like that. And so I wouldn't allow the spark to die. And honestly, the other part that helped me was I had a couple of really good friends that wouldn't allow me to forget who I was. They would call me every week. They would check in on me. I had to travel to the United States a couple of times, and I would meet with them. In December of 2018, I went home to Annapolis and Boston. And I swear to God, if it hadn't been that I had gone on that trip and met my friends from Boston who knew me like from college and my friends from Annapolis who knew me from business, and they reflected back to me the person I was, the strength I had, the confidence, the resilience. If that had not happened, I don't know if I would have been strong enough to actually grab a duffel bag and walk out with nothing, which is the way I walked out. So there's a lot, you're right, there is a lot of risk in my story, probably more risk, but how many women have we known or do we know that are trapped in lives and don't think that they have a way out? And they do.
And they do.
And I want to inspire those women.
Yes. And for those women at the time, it doesn't feel like there's a way out. So what I'm interested in is, where did your courage there's two things I want to talk about: the courage, because to take risks takes courage. The courage to leave everything behind and go to Ecuador in the first place, and the courage to leave.
You know, I think when I went to Ecuador, I was being drawn to something that I believed was available and I could only get in Ecuador. And that was the spiritual aspect. He was a remarkable human being. He was a flawed human being, but he was a remarkable human being. He was an authentic, genuine shaman, not like, oh, I got my certificate at the Shaman University this weekend.
Yeah.
And the conversations we had and the experiences I had with him were so intense. It was like personal development, spiritual development on steroids. And it was what I had been seeking all my life. I had always been seeking a way to marry the secular and the sacred since I was a little girl. And he was basically saying to me, I'm offering you the ability to resolve your quest. And that was very compelling to me. And at the time, I had just been divorced after 2 years of separation. I was really disillusioned with the work in corporate because I saw so many things that were out of integrity. I mean, I was becoming aware of all the illusions in my life and being so disappointed and sad and grieving. And then all of a sudden, he offered me this opportunity, this possibility for a different kind of life, one that I could step into my own healing powers with someone who was a master and create what eventually was a retreat center for healing. It was pretty compelling. And so the courage was a little different in that it was like, it's like courage is mixed up with risk, right? So although I recognized that there was high risk, I would say to leave and go to Ecuador was like more like being drawn by that, by being drawn by the idea of what could be possible for me as a spiritual person and the ability to create something through my own healing, through my own development spiritually. And then to leave, it was a matter of, saving my life. You have to read the book to know what that means. But yeah.
On that note, and I guess this is where I was coming at this from, is that throughout the whole book, there is so much duality. I think it's one of the real themes inside the book. There's America and there's Ecuador. There's being pulled towards something and there's running away from something. There's a lot of duality in the book. And I think there are a lot of metaphors that I took as I read the book of dark and light and, lots of duality. The courage to up and go to Ecuador was obviously different to the courage that was needed to leave. both compelling motivations, one to have the life of your dreams and one to save your own life.
Yeah.
What do those two experiences and you sharing so openly about them in the book, what do those offer women in terms of empowering them to create the life that's right for them?
I think we only know how courageous we are when we have to do something that we don't think we're able to do.
Oh, great point.
I think that's when courage really shows up, when we have to be more courageous than we ever thought we could possibly be. And I think that's at the center of that, because I would never have imagined that I could have done what I did. Like, I read the book and I go, who was that?
So here's an interesting question on the back of that then. If a friend came to you today and said, hey, listen, I've met this guy and I'm thinking of doing this, exactly what you did, what would your advice, what would your kind of reaction to that be now that you have come back to a life that you live now, which is a happy life, it's an authentic life, it's absolutely you living your fullest life, I guess, now? What would you say to someone who was thinking of doing something that big, disrupting their life in that way?
So I think one of the things that happened to me through this process was staying away from the words bad and good. Was this a bad experience? Was this a good experience? Right? It was the experience that I was destined to have. It was the experience that brought me to who I am today, which I'm really happy where I am and what I'm doing and stuff. So when you ask me that question, I might have an opinion about that person and what they're doing, but I don't know. I don't have the universal perspective, whether or not that is the experience that's going to evolve this person to become something greater than they ever thought possible. So I can't stand in the way of that. The only thing I can do as a friend is say, I love you. No matter what happens, I will always be here for you. If you feel you have to go do this to find yourself or whatever, go for it. And just know that I'll be here if you ever need it. The me before this experience would have said, oh my God, don't do that. Are you crazy? Which is what people said to me. What the hell are you doing? Are you out of your mind? All right. Now on the other side of that, we don't know what's good and what's bad. We don't know. It's like that. I think it's a Zen story where the one about the grandfather and the grandson, where they're on a farm and the son helps the grandfather with the farm. The son falls down and breaks his leg. And he says, oh my God, this is terrible. And the grandfather says, maybe yes, maybe no. And then the army comes by looking for recruits, can't take the son because he's got a broken leg. And the grandson says, oh, isn't that great? And the grandfather says, maybe yes, maybe no. The horse runs away. And the grandson says, oh my God, this is terrible. We lost the horse. And the grandfather says, maybe yes, maybe no. The horse returns with a mare. This is great. Maybe yes, maybe no. And it goes on and on. So and it's like, that's such a great story. It's a great, fable or whatever it is. It's an Eastern tradition. I don't remember if it's Zen or Buddhist or whatever it is. But I remember thinking, maybe yes, maybe no. But I'm not the one to decide.
Oh, Alicia, what a lesson for life. I love that. This has been a fantastic first episode of this. There is so much. It's almost like I want to make a 4-hour podcast episode because I have so much I want to talk to you about. I know in the next episode, we're going to start talking about navigating the bardo. Can you just, as a little sneaky peek to the next episode, explain what that means?
Yeah. So the bardo is the place in between. It's what William Bridges in Transitions calls the neutral zone. The bardo, Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist monk, talks a lot about the bardo. The bardo is when you find yourself, you're not where you were and you don't know where you're supposed to be. And you're in this middle place. And it is that place that I said, it's stepping into the void, stepping into the unknown. It's where risk and fear and courage all come together, right? you are at choice. Like, how am I going to navigate that? And I think that's what we can talk about, because change happens in the void when we have to become unattached to the things that tether us to a way of being in life that isn't us, that isn't authentic, because we've evolved past that. But yet we don't know what's on the other side. We don't know what's going. And so a lot of times this is exactly the point when people come to work with me in Portugal on their retreats, especially the Becoming Limitless, the individual retreat, because they've done all the coaching and all that stuff that is the traditional way of doing it. But there's a lot of stuff that they haven't done that they can only do when they are away from the thing that keeps them where they are, which is their life, right? And all the pressures and all the obligations. And they come here, and it's a process of gently unraveling the things that tangle us up, and then starting to create something new in the void. But the void is no longer scary. The void becomes a place of emergence. And that's where the work happens. And that's where the joy happens.
Absolutely. So that is going to make for a great episode. Thank you so much. I can't wait to dive into that with you. For this one, we'll wrap up there. This is already unfolding to be a fabulous series for the podcast. So this is great. If you're listening in, you will see in the show notes, I'm going to put some links for obviously the book, The Shaman's Wife, which depending on when you're listening to this, you can either pre-order now or buy. And we're also going to put some links into ways you can find out more about Alicia. So her retreats that she hosts in Portugal, and other ways that you can read work that she's done, connect with her. We'll put all of that in the show notes. So in the meantime, Alicia, I will see you back here very shortly for episode 2. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and that getting our heads together this week has filled your mind with what's possible. If you love the show, would you do me a massive favour, please? Would you leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts? It would really help me put more heads together, reach more ears, and expand more minds. Until next week, bye for now.